Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm John Harrington, the editor of PRWeek UK, and with me today are my colleagues, news editor Siobhan Holt and senior reporter Evie Barrett. Hello both, hope you're well this sunny day.
Hi John, good thank you. Enjoying the sunshine for a change.
Yeah, it makes such a difference.
Right, it's April Fool's Day at the time of recording, but many businesses don't see the funny side of new tax and cost rises that come into effect today. Sorry to bring down the mood. The increase in national insurance contributions in particular, plus capital gains tax and a rise in the national living wage, will all hit businesses, including PR firms, of course. On top of this, higher council tax, energy and water bills, and things like broadband give a sense that financial pressure has grown generally and what's been dubbed Awful April. Not the cheeriest subject, I agree, but we wanted to look at what PR agencies are thinking and how they're reacting. We will end on something light and fun though, I promise, so stay tuned for later in the podcast. But for now, let's get into the meat of this issue. So Siobhan, you've been looking at the results of PRWeek's latest trading tracker survey of PR agencies. What does this tell us?
Yeah, as you say, John, we sent out a few questions that we do every month on our trading tracker, but we thought we'd pick this topic and take a more focused analysis, really, at what the agencies are saying. So we asked them to tick from a list of steps they'd taken as a direct result of April's cost increases. According to these stats, just over half said they'd done nothing specifically, but a significant minority, around 1 in 8, have done things like, for example, frozen or scaled back recruitment or annual staff and pay increases. So slightly more than that, 1 in 7 have scaled back freelance costs, and almost 1 in 4 have reduced costs elsewhere, such as maybe their building or office costs or their suppliers.
Thanks, Siobhan. What do you make of this? Are you surprised at these findings?
I think I'm not really, because it makes sense that each business is sort of looking at their own situation and trying to adapt accordingly. I was actually more surprised that they were looking at maybe doing reduced costs elsewhere. I thought they would just go straight for pay or recruitment. So I was actually more surprised that 1 in 4 have reduced costs elsewhere. That was the bigger shock for me. What did you make of it, John?
I sort of think that the last thing you're going to want to do is reduce pay for your staff or have redundancies. Things like that are very difficult in lots of ways, aren't they? I mean, obviously they cost money up front, but they're very distressing. No one wants to let people go. So I think you're probably going to look at things like if you can pay a bit less to your suppliers or if you can cut down on your bills elsewhere. I can see why that would be a preferred option. And equally, freelancers, the fact is it's a lot easier to reduce the amount they use freelancers than it is to lay people off for obvious reasons. So I can kind of see why that is a slightly more popular option. But I also think these figures are quite strong when you think about it. I know you mentioned the fact that just over half haven't done anything, but a lot of those people would have taken some of these steps anyway, but maybe not specifically 100% in result to these cost increases, but generally because it's a difficult time out there. So as a snapshot, it's fairly damning about the impact that these cost rises are having on agencies. What do you think, Evie?
I think there are always going to be wider sort of challenges within the economy and things like that for PR agencies to tackle. I think this is just the latest iteration. I think the initial announcement probably scared and worried quite a few agencies, but then they will have, as you say, taken action since October to kind of gradually manage it. So I think, it hasn't had as big of an impact yet as you would have imagined when the announcement was first made and people were worrying about it. But I guess we'll see over the coming months how it plays out in reality. I got a sense from some that they're aiming to work harder and smarter to increase their revenue rather than immediately looking for ways to cut costs. So Graham Goodkind, boss of Frank, said that they're avoiding knee-jerk measures to reduce costs. I think it is just a case of being clever with the resources that you have. So Elizabeth Lewis-Jones, who is the chief exec of Liquid, said that costs have been reduced by focusing on capacity in the team, that they'd previously overstaffed to cater for things like training, holiday, unexpected projects. Now they're scaling that back a bit and realising that it's a luxury that they don't need. There are actually a few agencies who have taken a completely opposing view and see this as an opportunity. One anonymous agency boss said, "We believe that now is the time to recruit some exceptional staff and buck the trend of other agencies who are shedding staff." So I suppose one agency's loss is another agency's gain, and there will be agencies that do better from this in the long run.
Absolutely, and anecdotally we have had agency bosses on this podcast that have said similar things, that they are seeing a lot of CVs from some agencies at the moment, and so they're picking up staff that way. I think my worry is that if you're not hiring extra junior staff or replacing those that are leaving, that's putting a lot of burden on those members of staff that are there. And so I think agency bosses will need to be more observant of the support they are giving their current staff, that they don't overload, because that could lead them into further problems further down the line. And also, I think it doesn't bode well for new entrants into the sector, because if we're not offering placements or recruiting those junior members of staff, we're not bringing that talent in. So it could really impact the trade further in, say, 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, it was interesting looking at some of the comments for the trading tracker about what agencies are saying about these issues to add some colour to the stats. It does look like agency bosses are being very prudent and cautious, trimming costs where they can. And we're going to pick up on some of these comments. And unsurprisingly, most of them in this section were anonymous, because we allow people to comment anonymously. One agency boss said, "We've scaled back pay increases and reviewed any cost savings we can in our discretional spend." So that kind of makes sense. You can imagine maybe the office parties aren't going to be quite as lavish this year. But, the impact on hiring is real. Another anonymous respondent said, "The additional costs from national insurance means we cannot hire an additional junior person. We'll be looking to deliver more with the same team." And finally, another agency leader said, "Our main focus has been to think twice about replacing anyone who has resigned. It's not been a universal freeze on hiring, but it has meant a slight overall dip in headcount as a result." So that's another point here, isn't it? That you can reduce your staff costs without having to go through redundancies, but just simply not replacing people who leave, which I guess is a prudent strategy in some senses, but also a sign of the times. What else caught your eye in terms of the comments that people were making?
Last month, we heard of a lot of pitching and new business around. It seems like that's continued, but there's a slight bit more caution. So one of the comments that we had was from Mark Terry Lush, who is chief exec of Make Honey, and he said, "We got so many RFPs compared to month on month or quarter on quarter. I thought there was a magical turnaround, and then some budgets changed, clients dragged their heels or changed their minds. More positively, we're having a profitable quarter, but that in many ways is down to cost cutting and solid housekeeping by our accounts teams." So I think it's promising, but there's still that little worry of actually getting things over the line. Similarly, Nick Braund, who is founder of Words and Pixels, said the pipeline's getting busier and the work is out there, but folks still need dragging over the finish line. Right now, organic growth from existing clients is proving more fruitful than the pitch and pray new biz dance. I mean, we've heard about issues with new business process and pitching for a long time, and I think that's continued, but agencies still seem to be taking part, and I think it's a necessary way to really balance the books and to bring work in. So it's tough, I think.
And I think a lot, especially from the comments, seem to say that the decisions were dragging and it was really impacting their sort of ability to keep the business moving at the moment, I suppose, with the sort of momentum, because it's very hard to plan when you're not sure what pitches are going to be coming up and what resources you're going to need for that, whilst also finding out if you've won them, and keep that build going through the early part of this year. So real challenging time, I think, for the agencies, wouldn't you say, John?
Yeah, I would. I feel that one word that sort of seems to come up quite a lot, or one that certainly people are intimating, is frustration. That sense that there are these opportunities, but we're just not quite getting them. One anonymous agency comment here I thought was interesting. It said, "After a flurry of RFPs in January and February, we have seen resulting pitches cancelled last minute, or clients choosing the safe option of staying with the incumbent. The result, less revenue progression than we had initially hoped merely a month ago." So there is that sense, I think, of disappointment, a sense that, there's a lot there, but it's a little bit emperor's new clothes sometimes, perhaps. Having said that, there are some that are just really motoring ahead. Yeah, so Graham Goodkind at Frank, actually, again. He said, "It's been a pretty brisk March with a definite increase in social and influence, or PR and social integrated briefs incoming. A couple of nice new wins, just navigating their way through procurement, legal and contractual stages. Decent start to the first quarter all in all." So, as I say, it's not doom and gloom, and there's stuff happening. There's a lot of activity. People are busy. Nobody's twiddling their thumbs by the sounds of it, but sometimes it's just that frustration of going from a good prospect to money in the bank that is causing an underlying sense of frustration out there, I think.
The involvement of social in PR briefs is something that I'm hearing a lot of. I think more and more they're being tied together. And certainly Unilever's recent decision to invest more in influencers, I think, reflects that. And I think we're going to start to see a lot more PR teams relied upon for their digital talent. So I think, experts in that are going to be snapped up even quicker.
Yeah, Warren Johnson was one boss that said that he described it as been a strong month to finish Q1 with a continued stream of new business wins and some exciting pitches. He said influencer work was particularly sought after, increasingly also incorporating B2B social. So right there, that's one agency boss backing up what you've just said, Evie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a trend that's only going to be on the up. I mean, it's something we covered a little bit last year. We were talking about the revival of social media specialist agencies and people from those agencies linking it to exactly this. Clients just want to invest more in influencer marketing. Plus, social media is in such a flux, isn't it? I mean, there's the decline of Twitter, X, there's the huge rise of TikTok, and then uncertainty about what's going to be happening with TikTok. There's all the regulation, which is a lot of question mark about what kind of regulation there will be in what territories and how it will pan out. So I think there's this sense that a lot of clients are looking for really excellent counsel and execution around social media and particularly around influencers. I was reading something the other day where they were kind of saying that influencers have effectively overtaken quote unquote celebrities when it comes to the ambassadors that brands want and the people that brands want to work with. And I know that we could debate for quite a long time about the difference between an influencer and a celebrity these days, but I think in general, it feels like last year was perhaps quite a watershed moment in that sense. And this has really been reflected in the kind of briefs that PR agencies are looking for. So we can certainly see that as a big investment area. And actually, we've got our top 150 project coming up. And I won't give too many spoilers for that, but part of that will look at the sort of biggest investment areas. So that's one to pay attention to throughout April. Actually, we're bringing some of those sort of preview pieces out. So take a look at that. But certainly a big trend. Moving on a bit, Evie, you've been taking some soundings from the comms recruitment world in terms of going back to that issue of national insurance rises, cost pressures. What have you found there?
I spoke to the recruitment firm Latte on their predictions for what the impact of the national insurance changes would be. They were fairly upbeat. They anticipate that pay rises and promotions won't be impacted because of the standard competitive market rate. Agencies are more likely to absorb these costs before reducing pay rises and promotions in order to keep the best talent. They also said it's unlikely that we'll see a lot of redundancies because that's usually a last resort. They said that unless agencies are already operating slim profit margins, that they'll look to cut costs elsewhere, which is what we've heard from agency bosses within the trading tracker. They said that to offset costs, they believe agencies could turn more to freelancers because although it's more expensive on a day-to-day basis, it gives the flexibility to hire and pause where needed. So it could create more opportunities, particularly for short-term roles and project-based things, although it's difficult to be sure of that. On the slightly more negative side, in terms of hiring, the recruitment firm said that agencies are likely to be more cautious, particularly at junior levels. They flagged that the minimum wage increase pushes the salary for full-time entry-level roles over 25k for a 40-hour work week. So depending on an agency's salary bands, there could be less of a jump from junior account exec to account exec positions, and also potentially reduced availability of internships and grad schemes. So slowdown of junior hiring overall, as you were saying, Siobhan, which I think is potentially a bit worrying in the long run, especially when you've got people saying that AI will develop the skills of a account exec in however many months, this kind of thing. It does make you wonder what the next generation of talent in PR, what their jobs will really look like.
I also think there's a slight concern with these things. If you've got a sort of a raised minimum amount for more junior staff, which is obviously a very good thing, it might mean that the temptation is to have lower wage increases for people in, say, mid-management roles. And I think that can sometimes lead to a bit of resentment, maybe, a bit of a sense of people in kind of very important roles, often leading accounts. These people may feel like they're really struggling with their own cost of living, particularly if they've got, families and dependents. So, yeah, I just wonder if there's a danger of a sort of a knock-on impact on those sorts of roles if the sort of the minimum amount has been raised. But as I say, it's obviously a good thing that junior staff are paid more, but again, it's another challenge to navigate, really. Okay, well, thank you both for all your insights into that. Do check out PRWeek's Top 150 monthly trading tracker, which goes live this week with far more detail and all of these things and lots of quotes from agency bosses to give a really good picture, as it does each month, of the state of trading. So check it out. Right, as promised, we're going to end on a much lighter note. Tuesday was April Fool's Day, and Evie, you've been looking at some of this year's April Fool's campaigns. What are some of the highlights? What do you think of April Fool's as a brand opportunity these days? Have we just had enough, or is there still value in these sorts of pranks?
We've had quite a range of campaigns this year. It felt like there was a little bit of a revival. Some of them were slightly cheesy. Some of them genuinely made me laugh. I think more than anything, it's an opportunity for maybe the quirky challenger agencies to show their creativity and come up with some out-of-the-box ideas that don't have to go through quite as many levels of sign-off as usual. Small brands tend to do it best, in my opinion. So one of my favourite examples from this year was The Odd Company's portable mattress for commuters, which was aptly named City Napper. The imagery on that one was particularly funny, so shout out to Bottled Imagination, who are the agency behind it. Another organisation that you may not expect to really go all out for April Fools, but which absolutely does, is the Royal Albert Hall. They take it very seriously, which I appreciate. I think if you're going to do it, you have to really put some effort into it. They put together a full press release every year, which contains some absolute gems. So this year they announced an immersive Nokia experience, including a Royal Philharmonic Orchestra performance of classic ringtones and live-streamed games of Snake on a classic Nokia handset. The event is also said to involve an authentic early 2000s car boot sale, where fans can expect to find cases illegally printed with low-resolution photos of David Beckham, Iron Brew, the Black Eyed Peas and Yeovil Town FC. The press release states that the experience is not purely about nostalgia, it's also about community, aspiration, empathy, well-being, Snake 2, the organ, mental health, sustainability and ringtones. So yeah, I think if you're going to go for something like that, you have to really lean into it and acknowledge how stupid these kind of things are.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been reading a few this morning, haven't we? And I've been a chuckle in the office. And I must admit that the Royal Albert Hall one it was one of my favourites this year. I think what I enjoyed about it was also the stunt said that they're going to involve the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra underscoring the evening with 3310 ringtone classics such as Groovy Blue, Mozart 40, Mosquito and Hurdy-Gurdy, of which I've not heard some of those names of a ringtone for a very long time. I'm showing my age there. But I also liked that they dropped in like that organist Anna Lapwood would be involved, and obviously they're going to have to run that by her, and I just really enjoyed the effort. As you say, they'd done a full press release, they'd really gone to town on it, which I think was brilliant. And also it's an institution that you don't anticipate is going to take part in that. So yeah, a lot of fun. Another one that stood out to me was Victory Leisure Homes, which is a Yorkshire-based luxury lodge manufacturer, for those that don't know, and they were dropping 3 of its most popular holiday homes in Manhattan to bring the spirit of Yorkshire to the heart of the Big Apple. Visitors to Central Park would have been able to hire out the lodges and enjoy a piece of Yorkshire in Brew York, was part of the release. On social, they encouraged people to think of ways that New York City and Yorkshire could collaborate. So they were thinking of like Yorkshire pudding pizza. It was just, and some of the suggestions underneath were just as daft. But I thought it was another fun way of celebrating April Fools.
I have to be honest, I'm not a big fan of April Fool campaigns. I don't mean to sound like a party pooper, but I've got a couple of issues. The first issue is there much evidence that they work? That they actually help brands? I mean, maybe they do. I'm not sure I've ever seen evidence that they actually do. The problem is they're up against a million other brands trying to do the same thing. And I think it just, these days, I don't know how many of them really kind of get a huge amount of publicity. I saw one comment that April Fool's was great in the days of print media, before the internet, when there was a kind of limited number of, if you like, spots where you can have these things. It's in print or it's on, the and finally bit of the news. Whereas these days, the internet is so full of like nonsense and kind of fake news anyway. And the number of kind of quirky brand campaigns that we write, that we cover each week, and some of them are great and some of them are probably less good, but I just don't see how April Fool campaigns are that much different to that, personally. I also think if you look at some of the actions that companies are doing, some of it does sound like an April Fool. I mean, that story from a few days ago about WH Smith rebranding as TG Jones, I mean, that sounds like an April Fool to me. It genuinely does, but it's actually happening. And, you know, there are many more crazy things that happen. Don't even get me started on politics. I mean, I think that's a whole new podcast in itself, but we don't really need to go there. I also think there are difficulties when it comes to the sort of journalist PR relationship. I noticed a post on LinkedIn from Dana McAlpine, deputy editor at HuffPost UK. Dana said, "Godspeed to every other journalist trawling through terrible fake press releases this AM. PRs, I cannot stress enough, if you do not mark your press releases as April Fool's jokes and are expecting us to run them, do not expect coverage on future stories." Sort of harsh. And I saw a good quote just now actually on LinkedIn from Mark Perkins, the former creative leader at Cal and W and others. Mark said, "We live in absurd times. The April Fool can't compete," which I think is a good point. But, there we are. They're the times we live in. Anyone want to come back and defend April Fools against my harsh words?
I think the point about labelling press releases is a really good one, because actually this year there were a few where they came through and I showed them to Siobhan and I was like, I think these are April Fools, but I don't know because it didn't actually say. And it's like, you're not trying to trick the journalist. It's a joke for the audience. The journalist is supposed to be in on it, otherwise it doesn't really work. So yeah, I think some PRs need to learn that. But otherwise, I don't know, it's a bit of fun. But like you say, most campaigns are fun anyway that we write about. So is it needed? I don't know. But
yeah, and I do slightly agree with you, John, on how much coverage do they actually get from it. I think you might have a point there on that, because I do remember in my earlier journalism days, we would do one on the titles that I worked on, and that just isn't really a thing that we do anymore. But also, just to remind PRs as well, it ends at midday. The amount of them that I've had this afternoon going, can you just add in our April Fools? No, ends at midday, people. I'm very strict on that rule. If you're going to take part and follow it properly.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I guess I'm going to sort of slightly row back on what I said earlier on one level, because thinking about it, I guess the fact that there are fewer journalists working on big titles now and they do just want stuff to write about, that maybe there's a sense that you could just get it out there and it'll be a quick win. I sort of get that. And that's a very different situation than it was, maybe sort of 10 or certainly 20 years ago. So, yeah, I can also see things from that point of view. But I think it does go back to that point, what's the sort of, where's the evidence that these actually work? But yeah, maybe what I'm saying is not in the spirit of April Fool's Day and I should just take the day in the spirit it's meant. But there you go. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Siobhan and Evie for your insights. If you've enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access PR Week's Beyond the Noise podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.